Alvin Kamara is one of the most dynamic weapons in the NFL. In both the receiving and the running game, Alvin Kamara has been one of the best running backs in the NFL since he was drafted in 2017. We look at his numbers in the 2022 season. Alvin Kamara had 897 yards rushing with 2 rushing touchdowns. Pair that with 490 yards receiving and 2 receiving touchdowns. He was a really decent player for the Saints last year with 15 games played. Going back to when he was drafted in 2017, he has been a dynamic weapon on both the ground and through the air, and now he's going to be missing what Ian Rappaport projects to be 2 to 6 games early on in the season for the New Orleans Saints for a misdemeanor charge that he had dating back to the Pro Bowl in 2022, where there was an altercation with him and a fan. And if you've seen the video, it's not a great look for Alvin Kamara, but he's going to be missing some time. What do the Saints do to withhold his absence? Because that is a big piece of your offense, who has had 72 total touchdowns dating back to 2017. He's been huge for this team. What are you going to do to withhold his absence, to maintain your relevancy and stay afloat with a piece like that missing from your team? And they got some options here. I'm going to be breaking that down in today's video. We obviously know the big thing that the Saints did this offseason was they went out and they signed Derekcarr, who was cut from the Las Vegas Raiders. They signed him to a massive contract, and I'm going to be very curious to see kind of the year that Derekcarr is going to have, because he's coming off of 2 less than ideal seasons where he's thrown 14 interceptions in each of the last 2 years. Now in 2021, the Raiders were good enough to get into the wild card game. In 2022, they did not have the same luck. They were picking in the top 10 last year. He was benched towards the end of the season as they started Jarrett Stidham. But Derekcarr, going back, has had a really solid NFL career. 27 touchdowns in 2020. His career high going back to 2015 where he had 32 touchdowns. He's a really solid quarterback, and he's been a good piece for the Raiders, where really each and every season, I think they've done a pretty poor job in Vegas of surrounding him with a ton of talent. I know last year he had Davante Adams, just didn't really end up working out. Now you look at this situation where he comes into New Orleans where they've got some decent receivers. Chrisolave I thought was fantastic as a rookie. Michaelthomas is coming back, and hopefully he can return to his old self. And then you had Alvin Kamara, and you're like, okay, this offense might be a little exciting. The Saints were preparing for this to happen. We kind of knew that there was going to be a suspension coming, and that's why the Saints were pretty active in the running back market this offseason, as they went out and they signed former Detroit Lions running back Jamal Williams, and he was really good. He led the NFL in rushing touchdowns last year. I think he is a power back, more of your short yardage, goal line runner situation. But who are you going to have that you were going to put at that every down back situation who is going to have the quickness, the elusiveness as Alvin Kamara had for the Saints all these years? And I think for looking at it, that's going to be their 3rd round pick, Kendre Miller. They spent a 3rd round pick on another running back from TCU, which at the time, the pick did not make a lot of sense to me. I thought there were big holes on the defense. I thought they could have gone out and added another receiver, and they didn't really make any of those moves. And they went with another running back. And, I mean, Kendre Miller was pretty good last season. In 14 games for the Horned Frogs, he had 1,399 yards with 17 touchdowns on the ground. He threw in 16 receptions for 116 yards. He had about 1,500 yards scrimmage and 17 touchdowns. I think he's their X factor for this season. I think he's going to have a really big season if the Saints are going to stay afloat. Because if you look at the division, the NFC South got a lot better this offseason with the Panthers improving. You've got the Falcons improving. And while I don't think Tampa improved necessarily, I still think they are a respectable team. They've got a good defense. They've got solid weapons. And when you're losing a piece as important as Alvin Kamara, a guy who has been a backbone for this offense dating back to when they had Drew Brees, he was a huge part of those playoff runs. You lose a guy like that, you're going to need to replace the production somehow. I think it's got to be Kendre Miller. I think he's going to have to step up in a big way. And I think it helps him that we have this information coming out in training camp, because I'm sure they are giving him first team reps in training camp. I think he's going to have a big year. What that looks like, I'm not exactly sure, but I think we're going to need to see him be a nice piece for this team. If you look at the Saints' schedule to start, it's not a tough early on season schedule. You got the Titans, which is a home game. I think that game's 50-50. I'm not as high on the Titans as a lot of people. You got the Panthers on Monday night. I love that Panthers squad. You got the Packers, the Bucks, the Patriots, and the Texans as your first 6 games. Honestly, there's 6 winnable games. If you can get average play from a guy like Kendre Miller, Jamal Williams, and if you can have the protection on Derekcarr, allow him to read the field and allow him to make plays, I think the Saints are going to be able to stay afloat and continue to fight for this NFC South, which I think is going to be a bloodbath. I think it's going to be a very good NFC South this year. It's going to be competitive, and I think you need good play early on in the season to try and win some football games. I think Kendre Miller is the X factor for the Saints this year, and I'm going to be very curious to see if he could step up. Losing Alvin Kamara is a tough one, but I think Kendre Miller is going to need a big year. I think you're going to see a really solid start to the season. For my fantasy football players out there, I would take Kendre Miller in one of those middle rounds and buy in because I think he's going to get a lot of touches early on. We saw even last year, Dennis Allen ran the ball a lot, even with Mark Ingram. He did run the ball quite a bit. I think we're going to see Kendre Miller get utilized a lot early on in the season for the Saints. I think he's going to produce. I think the Saints, in those first 6 games, if Alvin Kamara misses that much time, the number is still up in the air. I think that's a 4-2 start on the season. I think you could beat Tampa, New England, Houston, and then I think you could probably beat Green Bay or Tennessee. It's a pretty easy start. I think that the Saints can withstand this short suspension from Alvin Kamara, and we'll see what they can do entering the rest of this season. But we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. How do you think this is going to affect the Saints here in the long run? Do you think they are going to struggle early on? Are they going to miss Alvin Kamara? We'd love to hear your thoughts. But that's going to do it for me. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.